Our guest for this Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama live Lockdown Lowdown grew up in Los Angeles and first came to international attention in April 2018 when he won both first prize and the audience prize at the prestigious Malco competition for young conductors in Copenhagen. In September 2019, it was announced that he had been appointed principal conductor of the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, and that role will start in the 2021 season. Ryan Bancroft studied trumpet at the California Institute of the Arts alongside additional studies in, wait for this, harp, flute, cello, and Ghanaian music and dance. He then went on to receive an M.Mus with distinction from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland in orchestral conducting. And while studying in Scotland, he played trumpet with the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra on many occasions. He continued his studies in the Netherlands, where he is now based. During the various rounds of the Malco conducting competition, his natural musicality and warmth impressed the players and audiences alike, and his conducting without a baton was praised for its fluidity. In the 1819 season, Bancroft made debuts with a number of orchestras, including the Rotterdam Philharmonic, Netherlands Rice Opera, BBC Scottish Symphony, and Norwegian National Opera orchestras. Ryan made his debut with the BBC National Orchestra of Wales in November 2018, stepping in at short notice for Xiang Zhang to conduct a programme of Beethoven and Weber on a tour of North Wales. He returned to the orchestra later that season, conducting a programme of contemporary music at the Vale of Glamorgan Festival and a studio recording of Sibelius 5. In the 1920 season, highlights included debuts with the Stockholm Philharmonic Orchestra, the Rai Turin, BBC Symphony Orchestra, Orchestre Philharmonique du Luxembourg, Stavanger Symphony Orchestra, Malmö Symphony Orchestra, and Munich Chamber Orchestra. In the USA, he'll make his debuts with the Seattle and Cincinnati Symphony Orchestras, and he will also have his debut concerts in China, where he'll be working with the NCPA Orchestra in Beijing, amongst others. A strong advocate of new music, Ryan has performed with Amsterdam's acclaimed Newydd, you're going to help me with that pronunciation, I hope, soon. New Ensemble, assisted Pierre Boulez in a performance of his Syrian Seas in Los Angeles, premiered works by Sofia Gubaidulina, John Cage, James Tenney, and has worked closely with improvisers such as Wadada Leo Smith and Charlie Hayden. Wow, Ryan, thanks ever so much for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I have to start with a question that leapt out at me from your biography, and that is Ghanaian dance. Can you tell us a bit about that, and do you still dance?
Of course, yes, I do still dance. I was first and foremost, before I was a musician, I was first and foremost a dancer, actually. I studied ballet as well as Ghanaian music and dance, but Ghanaian music and dance was far, far later. But there was sort of a point where I had to decide, am I going to go down the dance route or am I going to go down the music route? And so when I went to college, I decided on music, just because the university that I went to had a great connection with the dance school and just so happened to have a really great, as they called it, world music programs. And it just so happens that they had an incredible Ghanaian music and dance program. And originally, I mean, just in sort of my puny mind at the time, I was really only interested in doing Haydn and Mozart at that time. And then I, of course, had to do electives. And some of the electives that were available were character animation or poetry, but then there was also the option of doing Ghanaian music and dance. And so I thought, okay, that could be fun. Let's try it out. I subsequently did it for about 7 years while I was in California, ended up teaching it as well, getting paid for it, which was really, really great. And then unfortunately, when I moved to Scotland, there wasn't a massive Ghanaian music and dance scene. So I kind of had to stop when I was in Scotland, but I'm still very much so connected to it and still probably one of the top 3 things that's taught me about music, period.
Really?
Oh yeah, easily.
Do you feel that sense of bodily freedom as a conductor? And do you think that dance background has informed your style?
Yes, of course. I mean, when it comes specifically to Ghanaian music and dance, there's no hierarchy or difference between the drummers and the dancers, because the fact of the matter is the drummers also dance and the dancers also drum. You have to do both. It's just a part of the culture. It's a part of music making and it's a part of dancing as well. So at the same time where I was more focused on the dance, I was taking equal amount of drumming lessons at the exact same time. So the fact that it had this connection to the physicality as well as the audio, and of course, you know, rhythm training, for one point, it's really incredible, and you can't really get rid of that. And of course, when it came to ballet, that is, you know, being absolutely aware of your body at all time and sending a message with your body as well. So dance has been incredibly important, especially like learning how not to have tension in the body as well. That's been paramount.
Listen up, conductors. I'd like to start by bringing in Ella Roberts, who's a BMA's Year 2 composition student.
Hi Ryan. My first question is, do you think your conducting approach or style will change when you begin working with the BBC National Orchestra of Wales?
I'll say the cliche thing of we change as we get older, and as musicians, we will constantly evolve, of course. When it comes to the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, it's a very specific animal in that it's a recording orchestra, which means they are very quick and there's no wasting time with the orchestra. I just so happen to work a lot in Scandinavia as well, and in Scandinavia in general, people like to take time. They want to talk about it. They want to go to the very last second of rehearsal. With BBC National Orchestra of Wales, you are their best friend if you let them out early. Doesn't happen all the time, but it's more about efficiency, if anything. So with that, I guess the thing that will probably impact me the most with the orchestra is constantly distilling what I say, but most importantly, always having a focus on what I'm showing first and foremost, because there's really not that much time. I mean, we never have enough time. And especially with the BBC orchestra, with the radio orchestra, you really just have to be as concise as possible. And of course, inspire at the same time.
Thank you. My second question was, as a composer, I find writing for orchestra really exciting, but also quite overwhelming, just because of the sheer amount of possibility and different colours. In your experience of conducting, what you feel makes a successful or idiomatic orchestral work?
That's a really good question, actually. There's a couple of things. I really get along with composers that enjoy the conductor-composer relationship and trying to get as much out of that as possible. And then when it comes to the actual piece, the actual product, really having the players in mind, thinking of them specifically as players, thinking about their capabilities, thinking about what makes them uncomfortable, more importantly than what makes them comfortable, exploiting the uncomfortability as well. Because, I mean, just between me and you, one of my favorite things is seeing orchestra members squirm. It's really the best thing. That's where you find beauty. That's where you find edge. That's where you find noise. That's where you find expression in general. So for me, when I'm looking at a piece, I don't know, this might sound quite lofty, but I really appreciate a piece that's sort of given to the orchestra and then let them do what they're going to do. Of course, through rehearsal, we will fine tune it. And at least in my own process, I include the composer from second one till the very end, just to make sure that everything is sort of to plan in a way, but also being able to take suggestions from the orchestra as well and how that can improve it. And also like standing strong on what you want as well too. That's incredibly important as well, because sometimes I've worked with composers where, you know, an orchestra member or I will say, yeah, it might be better like this. And they say, yeah, whatever you think will make it better, do it. Just do it. Absolutely do it. It's really also just fighting for what you really want. That's, for me, that's impressive and that's inspiring because it forces me to think, why are they so strongly opinioned on this? And how can I adapt and possibly even change my opinion as well?
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love that answer, and I really wasn't expecting it. What I enjoy most is seeing orchestral players.
I was in the orchestra as well, and I'm allowed to say it.
There are a number of players in BBC Orchestra in the room this afternoon, so
fantastic!
I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic.
Okay. Julia, who's an Emma's composition student, can I bring you in now, please, Julia?
Hi there, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. I had to laugh at your dancing thing because that decision was made for me when I was about 12. They started casting me as things like Winnie the Pooh, and I wasn't going to be cut out as a prima ballerina.
I have to tell you, I was the Rat King in Nutcracker, and that sealed the deal for me as well. So don't worry.
But more seriously, my question is, can you talk a little bit about your thought process when you're programming new music?
That's also a very good question and incredibly relevant nowadays as well. I'm quite old-fashioned in my approach to programming, probably incredibly old-fashioned in that I'm always looking for the new. I'm always looking for what's happening now, who is underrepresented, who is looking for a premiere. And of course, at the same time, we are essentially art restorers too, at the same time. So when I'm looking for a program, obviously with any orchestra, you have to cover a wide range of repertoire. You need to have standard repertoire, obviously. That's the easiest thing to program, honestly. When it comes to that, at the same time, for me, it's important that I take my job as a researcher very important as well too. If I sort of only did what I knew, I'd probably get very bored after a while. So something that I do daily, at least for an hour every day, is constantly looking at websites of people that I've never heard of before. Composers in Madagascar, composers in Wales, composers anywhere really. And so for me, I'm constantly looking for pieces and composers by people that I had never heard of, listening as if it's Mozart. And then when I'm actually putting together the program, is this program interesting? Is this program sort of a cookie cutter program, or can I push this even further? And in general, I'll always push it further no matter what. Sort of the job for any musician, really, especially musicians in leadership positions or in an orchestra or something like that, where programming is a big part of your life, you have to fight for what you want. You have to fight for music. You have to fight for musics that are not heard as well. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. For me, it's always about looking for what's happening now and how it's relevant now as well. I mean, I was just speaking with a composer friend yesterday who I didn't even know was a composer. I knew him as a cellist. I simply knew him as a cellist, and he wrote this wonderful string sextet, and I had no idea. And then I was just thinking, well, actually, this would work really well in this program with this other orchestra. Would you mind if I did it? And it was as simple as just being open to something new. I don't know, it might be easier to put Barber's Adagio for strings on a program because you know you're going to sell tickets for it. You know that you're going to be getting people in seats because of that. But at the same time, we are musicians and we have to be enthusiastic about what's happening now. So for any program that I'm doing, obviously it's a collaboration. That goes without saying. It's a collaboration with the orchestra, with composers, with everything. But I always fight for having more diverse programming, no matter what.
I think that's amazing news to all the composers in the room who are just thinking of you coming to Cardiff. What's really refreshing to hear is that what you're saying about spending time every day looking just on websites at composers. And for our students, when you're writing away in your own room and you're creating music and then you're putting it up maybe on social media and thinking, is anyone actually going to ever hear this?
They do.
Yeah. And that is the other thing I'd love to just drill it down on a little bit when what you said was I'm old school in that I always try to program new music. I'm really interested in that concept of why that approach could be seen as old school.
I feel like I can get a lot of trouble for this. I feel like sort of the second half of the 20th century, first half of the 21st century, with some beautiful exceptions, people look primarily for comfort in the concert hall. And that's a beautiful thing. And I would never want to take that away. I mean, there has definitely been concerts that I've been to simply just because I wanted to hear beautiful music as I see it as beautiful music. When I say old school, you look at Beethoven, you look at Haydn, you look at Tchaikovsky, you look at Mahler, you look at Satie, you look at Boulez. I mean, these were all people that it was considered cool to go see their music. It was an in thing of people of all class systems, of course. And nowadays, there's this sort of museum quality for a lot of concert halls, which I would like to say the BBC is not one of those. But it's just something that I've seen that has presented itself overwhelmingly. And it's something that I feel that I have to fight against in a lot of ways. Otherwise, we're not going to get masterpieces. There are masterpieces, of course. There are masterpieces in the 21st century, in the 20th century, and unfortunately, they're not programmed. That's a big problem for me. That's a huge problem for me. So for me, when I say old school, I don't know, I'm not old school in a lot of ways, but that's something that I'm very old school about, just making sure to keep things relevant to today and subsequently chic as well, because everyone wants, I mean, in my perfect world, everyone wants to support new music. That's my absolute perfect world.
It's really interesting, this whole debate, isn't it? Because I think very often managers of orchestras, venue managers are thinking, we've got to put bums on seats. We've got to get these waning audiences back. And I think so often the answer that they perceive is to stick with what people know, but you're so right that when people were flocking to hear the latest Beethoven symphony, they weren't just saying, oh, I only wanted to hear Haydn tonight.
Yeah.
And I think we underestimate our audiences a lot nowadays, particularly young audiences.
Yes, I would agree. At the same time, there is a lot of value in Mozart. There's, and I know no one's doubting that. There's a lot of value in Schumann. There's a lot of value in Stravinsky. And speaking from my job as a conductor working with an orchestra, what you can achieve with an orchestra, just like if we're speaking strictly about quality of sound and cultivating sound, you can get that with Tchaikovsky. You can get that with Schumann. You can get that with Schubert. Of course, you can do that as well. It's a part of the job. It's simply a part of the job. When I'm thinking of programming, I like to be as well-rounded as possible. So I know for me, I'll be the first to admit, I'm a young conductor. I'm 30 years old. I'm very much so still learning, and I'll be learning until I die. That being said, because of where I am in my career, Schumann teaches me just as much as Lachenmann. And so it's important for me to include these two. It's the same thing as George Friedrich Haas is the same as Joni Mitchell to me. It's all stuff that I need to be in partnership with, if that makes sense.
Perfect sense, and it's wonderful to hear. Constanza, can I ask you to come in?
Hello, thank you so much, Ryan, for answering all these questions. I was going to dwell a little bit on the Malco competition because, well, I got to watch it, which was amazing. And at least the feeling that I had to watch you conduct was that nothing was lost by the environment of it being a competition, which is a problem for quite a lot of us. At least I feel that if I ever got the opportunity to go to the competition, it would be hard. My question is, do you think this helped because people saw you? So it helped through your career. And do you think we should feel encouraged to go and try to do the same?
Yes, it opened up a million doors, absolutely. To be honest, it was the only competition I ever got accepted to. I applied to 2 or 3 other competitions, completely got rejected every single time. This was the very last time that I was going to apply for one. I didn't apply for competitions for about 1.5 years or so. And the reason why I didn't is I didn't really believe in the format so much. And in some ways, I still don't believe in the format somewhat. That being said, when it came to the Malco competition, it felt like, and I treated it more like it was an audition rather than a competition. And when it comes to an audition, you're not necessarily watching other people that are auditioning. So for me, just for my own process, I kind of distanced myself from it. And also, like when it came to the actual process, when I was on stage, I tried to treat it as much like it was any other part of the day. If I was going to the cafe to get a cup of coffee, if I was going into the town to see some museum or something like that, which I don't always do, but if I were to do something like that, try to treat it as something as a part of the day. I think there's value in them. I think there's obvious career value. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's not. It does have career value. I think if you're going into it with the right intentions, and in my belief, the right intentions are you simply want to make music. That's all. Like, you only want to make music. You obviously love music, of course. You want to show your love for the music as well. If you go to it to sort of prove something, it may go positive, it may go negative, who knows? But most likely, if you go into it with the mentality of, I need to prove that I'm a good conductor, then that's more ego speaking and not the music speaking in a way. We're all guilty of ego, and I'm the first to include myself in that, of course. But I think there is value. I think there's value in doing it. At the same time, for me, when I was formally studying conducting in Scotland as well as in the Netherlands. In Scotland, I was conducting voluntary amateur orchestras the entire time. And when I was in the Netherlands, I took the schooling incredibly serious. So I never took time out from school to do a competition or any masterclass or anything like that, just because I just so happened to be really happy with my teachers. But then when I did have free time, I was like, you know what, why not? This is a part of the world. If you can't beat them, join them. And I mean, it's an opportunity. It's simply an opportunity. And of course, at the same time, like obviously competitions are opportunity, but sort of going into the competition with the mindset of like, no, actually, I can do this. Like, I can do this. I feel, even if it's a fake confidence, you know, but going into it with like, well, I don't know what the experience is going to be like, might not have you be most connected with what's happening in the moment. But if you go in thinking, no, actually, I do have ideas. Actually, I do have something to say about this or something to show about this, then that's really important. And why not? Do it. It's fun. You get to conduct a great orchestra and you get to meet a lot of great people, and there's networking that comes with that as well too, which is also very valuable.
Ryan, can I pick up, you mentioned when you were in Scotland, you worked with a lot of amateur orchestras. And in Wales, there is a huge amateur music making tradition. How important do you think it is for young conductors to work with amateur ensembles?
For me, it was the number one thing that taught me about being a conductor, easily, like across the board. I mean, I mentioned Ghanaian dance was one of the top 3. This is the top 1. It gave me hours on the podium, to put it simply. It gave me hours studying. It gave me hours talking to musicians that, by and large, knew more about music than I did. And it's also having that realization. Maybe they're doctors or they're carpenters or something, and maybe they're not that good at their instrument, but they know every piece of chamber music by so-and-so composer, or everything that's happening now because they just so happen to have a huge enthusiasm for experimental Vondelweiser music, you know? It's also very difficult because conducting an amateur orchestra is an extremely different thing than conducting a professional orchestra. With a professional orchestra, there's obviously a certain amount of responsibility that the players take themselves. Of course, the professionals, we're getting paid. It's important for us to create a product and be prepared. That's across the board. A lot of times with amateur orchestras, it's also kind of a social hour. Of course, that is with professional orchestras as well, but with an amateur ensemble, you know, you have the famous tea that goes on way too long in the middle of it. And you never have enough rehearsal time because of those teas that go on for 30 minutes. But in a weird way, you learn to communicate with people very effectively, because if you're working with players that might not have a technical facility that is as good as Maxim Vengerov, but like who does? If you don't have a technical facility, you have to distill your words and distill your actions in a way that really gets across to players. And you have to inspire them as well. That's a huge part of it as well too. So everything's kind of bigger with amateur orchestras. And then once you get to professional orchestras, you'd be surprised how much easier that is than amateur voluntary orchestras. And I'm saying easier, obviously it's not always easy, of course.
Thanks, Ryan. Stefano, can I ask you to come in here, please?
Thank you, Tim. Hi, Ryan. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you too.
I wanted to ask you, as the new musical director of BBC Now, what is your cultural goal with the orchestra? And what are the new boundaries that you want to explore with them? And what are the boundaries that they want to explore with you?
We're in a time now where a lot more people have voices that did not have voices before. That's not something to take lightly. It's something that needs to be held to an esteem, almost more so than other things that have been happening in the past. Obviously, with BBC orchestras, with BBC National Orchestra of Wales, there's already a great tradition of commissioning pieces from, of course, all over Great Britain, especially from younger composers and whatnot. But then at the same time, we can also look at disparities there too. We can see, well, how diverse is this composition pool? How diverse is the age range of composers that are coming in as well, too. And so when it comes to me, when I'm thinking about just simply like quality of music in the world, it's there. Like the quality of music is there, from younger composers to older composers to soloists to artists in residence. The quality is all there. So there's no reason for this to be an incredibly diverse pool as well. So for me, again, I'm a young conductor. There are things that I'm learning. I will get great value out of conducting, you know, all the 3 Bs and all of that stuff, of course. But at the same time, as a musician, first and foremost, it's important to me to program music by people that most people have never heard of before. And that includes people of Black and brown ethnicities, and from people that are underrepresented, and of course with female composers as well, and conductors. And of course, like for me, it's always a collaboration, of course. And I can say with the BBC, this is an orchestra that's been ahead of that curve for quite some time now, as it is. So it's amazing that we can simply exploit that as much as possible. That being said, of course, a large part of my job is guest conducting, and it's a larger part than my job with BBC National Orchestra of Wales. It's going to other places. That's a more difficult thing, because if I'm going to do a debut somewhere, my name is not going to sell more tickets than Beethoven's name will, for a lot of people. And that's you know, me humbling myself, of course. But when it comes to that, that's really where the fight is. Obviously, with BBC National Orchestra of Wales, I have a partnership with them. I have a partnership, obviously, with the artistic board and the players, and I want to know what they're doing. And at the same time, I come with a very specific voice from a very diverse place, and that's important to me. So when it comes to cultural goals, how far can we push it? How many people are we going to make mad? Does it matter? I don't know. These are questions that I don't have answers for, of course, but you don't know unless you try, of course.
And you might not have the answers, but it's important that you're asking the questions. And
of course.
That is what we're all being asked to do right now. And I think the whole, you know, the heinous murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter international riots that have happened as a result of it, I think is forcing so many of us in the classical music world to really examine what we're doing, and crucially what we're doing to empower those 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds to make sure that classical music is championed and is just the opportunity is there for everyone, that everyone should be able to have access to this. Do you think that in your time in Cardiff you will be looking to do any of that outreach work with?
Of course, it's every conductor, every person in a position of leadership, if you will have a different answer to that, of course. I come from an extremely poor background. Myself, living in Los Angeles, we grew up just on the outskirts of Compton. I don't know if anyone even knows what Compton is, but I grew up just on the outskirts of Compton. A vast majority of my musical training until I was 18 was all from public school, was all from publicly funded youth orchestras. Publicly funded lessons as well, too. There are different outreach groups, of course, that can help you in Los Angeles. I don't know if it's like that now because, you know, the state of the arts, but we're always fighting for that. But at the same time, so much of my life has been having to get help from the community that is available to me within 5 miles of myself. And so because of that, not to sound too like flippant about it, but the community are the people that watch the concerts. So like if we're not going to them, how can we expect them to come to us, of course? And this, of course, means an incredibly diverse array of audiences too. That is people of different mental capacities. That is people of different disabilities. Not everyone can make it into a concert hall, of course. And maybe not everyone would agree, but music is really for everyone, you know, not to sound too poetic or highfalutin or anything, but it should, at least in the 21st century, in 2020, it should be the job of most artists is how can I go out, not just how can I get people to come to me. It's always a very delicate ballet that needs to happen. It needs to, and that means obviously affordable music lessons, that of course true, but for people that are not interested in playing music, how do you get music to them as well? And that means, I mean, obviously I'm principal conductor of an orchestra, but an orchestra in the 21st century means something incredibly different. I mean, if you can see all of these Zoom compilations that are sprouting up absolutely everywhere ad nauseum, and it's amazing. And it's just showing you have to be able to be a chamber musician, obviously. You have to be a soloist as well now, of course. You have to collaborate as much as possible with different mediums. It's just a part of the world. And maybe I'm just hyper aware of that growing up in Los Angeles, where you had a studio gig in the morning and then you taught lessons for about 6 hours after that, and then you did an orchestra gig, and then you went to the salsa gig right after that. It was just a part of the culture. You had to do that. And nowadays, in my limited time spent in Wales, and also when I was living in Scotland, music is obviously a huge part of the culture. So why shouldn't we go out as well? It's just a part of it.
Our relationship as a college with BBC Now is very, very important to us. I came from a working class community myself, and the BBC National Orchestra of Wales was hugely important in my own musical development because it was on my doorstep. Ryan, I'm really excited that we might get the chance to collaborate on some of these outreach programs and make these things a reality. All the conductors you've been speaking with so far have been orchestral, on the orchestral conductor. Can I bring in Lewis Wilkinson, who is a first-year master's brass band conductor?
Hi Ryan, it's great to talk to you. I read somewhere that your first experiences as a trumpet player were in marching bands and jazz ensembles, so I was wondering, to what extent do these experiences influence your choice of repertoire and approach to conducting orchestras?
Yeah, for me, if we're talking wind symphony, my gosh, I never actually played in a brass band, but I've played in, I can't even count how many wind orchestras. Oftentimes, I found the better players in wind orchestras. The most virtuosic wind players I can possibly imagine were in wind orchestras. In marching band, I was the assistant drum major for my high school marching band, and I also marched in a professional marching band because I was that much of a nerd outside of high school that I got paid for, which was amazing, of course. You learn endurance from that. I'm really glad you asked that because my best friend is a wind orchestra conductor that's currently studying at Northwestern. And we were talking about this just the other day, about how music for brass band, music for wind orchestra, how it's evolved in the last 30 years is massive, obviously. I mean, if you go back 20 years, you get these programs with wind orchestra, which have, I don't know, 8 or 9 different pieces on it that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But they're all fantastic pieces of music. But now it's gone to such an elevated and sophisticated level that this stuff should go into the orchestral concert hall as well, too. It's just, I don't know, it's a part of it. I feel with orchestras, if we're talking about the traditional orchestra, obviously there's a massive string section in there. That's wonderful. And they oftentimes get to play, you know, Verklärte Nacht and Barber's Adagio for strings and all of these wonderful pieces, of course. And then when it comes to the wind ensembles, oftentimes you give them a Mozart partita and then, you know, you say sayonara after that. But if you actually think about quality nowadays, especially where wind, I can't speak for brass band, of course, but when you're thinking of wind orchestra, where the music has gone, especially in this very avant-garde direction as of late, where, you know, it may not be dance folâtre or something like that, but you all of a sudden get this serial music that's coming with brass band, or sorry, with wind orchestra. And it's incredibly sophisticated music. And for me, I mean, I was just coming up with a program the other day where I was thinking, why can't the entire first half just be winds? Why not? It gives the strings a break. They would love that. You know, it's not the players that would have a problem with it, of course. Obviously, the wind orchestra world is an adjacent world, if you will, to the orchestral world. It requires a specific type of leadership, a specific type of sort of musical way of approaching it. But that's the same thing with choral conducting as well, too. It's a specific thing, but it's adjacent. It's not different in my mind, in a way. Of course, the repertoire is incredibly different, but I'll be remiss to say Hynny Symphony in B flat is a masterpiece, just as much as Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is. So I don't know. But that's just my opinion. I'm not. Maybe a lot of people wouldn't share that opinion, but for me, when it comes to programming, there's definitely a lot of stuff out there in the wind orchestra world. Even in the brass band, I mean, some of these brass bands, my God, I mean, especially in Wales. And actually, Gavin Higgins, the composer that we have, he obviously comes from a brass band tradition as well. And I can imagine that's going to make its way into his compositions as well, too. So I don't know, these things are becoming a lot more connected, thankfully.
And it's astonishing when you see the level of virtuosity with these amateur ensembles, brass band in usually in working class heartlands like the South Wales Valleys, north of England. Incredible playing, and it would be wonderful to get you to some of those when you're.
I have to tell you, I've conducted a brass band once in my life. It was a Salvation Army brass band in Carlisle, of all places, in the north of England, because I used to be music director of the City of Carlisle Symphony Orchestra, which was a lot of fun. And I remember one time I was just hired to conduct a brass band, and I was like, okay, I'm going to Carlisle, I'm going to do this. And then they started playing, and I just shot to the back of the wall because it was some of the most incredible playing, and I would have never have guessed it. I would have never have known. Easily.
You mentioned choral conducting. Can I bring in Thomas Mottishead, who's a graduating student from our master's program in choral conducting?
Firstly, if I can just say, I've never been much of a dancer myself. In fact, I'm absolutely just awful. But my dad, for the last 6 months, has been pestering me, saying, you should have some lessons in dance. And I've always been just really putting it off, but I may now have to return to him and say, you might be right, which I will never hear the end of, so thank you for that. Yes, so as Tim mentioned, in terms of choral works and sounds, I've sang with the National Chorus of Wales for the last 5 years, so obviously worked with quite a few conductors, often in the week of a concert, maybe say a 3-day period. Some I've obviously learned a lot from, others. So I wanted to ask when you might work with the National Chorus of Wales, or say another chorus, and you have such a limited time to work with them, if you could pick maybe 3 things, or less or more, that you're kind of looking out for, wanting to kind of work on with them specifically, what would those be?
Well, first and foremost, just to answer the dance thing, yoga's amazing, Tai Chi is amazing. There's so many different ways of approaching movement. And you can go be a bunhead if you want, and you want to go on point. Absolutely do it. It's fun. Trust me. It's so much fun, and it's terrible for your hip flexors. But other than that, when it comes to choral conducting, obviously with the National Chorus of Wales, we have a wonderful chorus master, as there is. So for me, in general, when I'm going into a project, there's going to be a certain level of preparation, a certain level of preparation. Sort of a lot of the nitty-gritty would have already have been taken care of, in a way. So for me, at least whenever I'm working with a symphony chorus, when I'm working with a choir on its own, we can talk about that. That's a separate thing. But when I'm working with a symphony chorus, I like to first talk about the words. What are we saying? Simply that. Because I think very often, and maybe I can be accused of this in the past as well, when I would go, or when people go to symphony choruses, you kind of do it, make sure it fits in, ask for more T and B, and there you go, which is incredibly boring in my opinion. But at the same time, when you're working, say, on a piece like Dream of Gerontius or The Creation of Haydn or something like that, the poetry is unreal, and no one would debate that as well. Or even in St. Matthew's Passion, for example, if we spent all this time solely working on pronunciation, solely working on balance, of course, obviously that's a part of it. I don't want to say that's not a part of it. That's 100% a part of it. But it has to start from a place that's real. And if it doesn't, then you're just making sound. And maybe some people will connect with it, but there needs to be a sort of unified vision from the very beginning. And so for me, usually the first rehearsal of something, if I'm lucky, sometimes, I did a Carmina Burana in Austria where I had a 3-hour rehearsal, which Carmina Burana is 2 hours as it is. So there's certain things that you can't take a lot of time for. But with a piece like Dream of Gerontius or St. Matthew's Passion, why not take a rehearsal just to talk about text? Why not take 2 rehearsals to talk about text? Having sung in a choir before, you get very used to having people just telling you what to do. And it's the same thing with orchestras as well. But the thing is, these are all able musicians. These are all people that know what they're doing, and have their own valid ideas as well. Of course, as the conductor, you need to come up with, your idea coming in, combine the 2, and then out comes the product. When it comes to being a singer, you have the best job. You get to say something. So much of what orchestral conductors do is very abstract, equally beautiful, But when you actually get text, when you get information, there needs to be that much focus on that as there is on balance. But that's my own opinion, of course. And of course, with symphony choruses, oftentimes there's a chorus master. Obviously, BBC National Chorus of Wales has a chorus master as well. And of course, he will also do that, or she will also do that as well. They will talk about the text and they will rehearse it and get it together and be incredibly artistic with it as well. As the person coming in later, there needs to be this focus on, like, what are we doing here? Why? I mean, that's really the question. It's just why. Like, why is this happening? Why are we doing Mozart's Requiem for the 500th time? Because it's an amazing piece of music, obviously, but what does it mean right now? That's really only one thing, but it's a really important one thing on talking about the text to a deeper level than you can possibly imagine. Sorry, this is going on far too long, but I had a lesson with Gergiev 4 years ago, and one of the things that he imparted on me was you need to show up to rehearsals not just with a few ideas, but with artistic luggage. And I think with a choir, you need to come with a U-Haul truck as well, too. It's incredibly important.
Thank you, Ryan. To hear you talking about text in that way with so much passion is fantastic.
It's everything. It's everything.
For all of us. Can I bring in another of our orchestral conductors now, Yoon Soo?
Hi, Ryan. Yes, I have two questions for you. The first is, I understand you will have your debut in Beijing, China, and I'm just curious, what are the programs like, and how did you and your team come to curate it?
My debut in Beijing was going to be in March. It's now being switched over. It's being switched over to next year, and also with the Suzhou Symphony Orchestra and Kunming Symphony Orchestra. But when it came to Beijing, I was so excited for that program, and I'm so upset that it got canceled. The programming for that, I was, for the first time, going to work with one of my musical heroes, the pipa player Wu Man, who I've been listening to since I was maybe 9 years old, something like that. And so right off the bat, I was offered gold, saying you get to do a pipa and cello concerto with her and another cellist that they hadn't decided on yet. And so for one, I was like, okay, great, fantastic. They offered programming suggestions to me. So that's something every orchestra, every ensemble will do completely differently. I get emails from orchestras saying, what do you want to do? That happens a lot. I also get emails from orchestras saying, this is the program. We absolutely do not want to change it. Any thoughts? Which is always a very perplexing question and email to get back to. And then oftentimes I get things where saying, okay, we have this soloist that wants to play this concerto or these two concertos. What do you want to put around it? We've already done A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Don't pick any of those composers, so pick something else. And it's always a collaboration. The thing is, with Beijing in particular, they wanted to do something other than Beethoven, just to put it simply. And I mean, the program that I had was an overture by my friend Huang Ro, wonderful, wonderful Chinese composer. And then we had this pipa and cello concerto by Vincent Lee. And then the second half was Copland's Third Symphony, because they hadn't played it in like 30 years or something like that. So I just so happened to love Copland. I just so happened to love Copland's Third Symphony. And I thought it kind of worked because they said to me, we want to have an East Asian / American program. Do with that what you will. So I came back with a lot of different programs. And then eventually, over the course of maybe 5-6 emails, we came up with an actual program. But oftentimes you'll get a lot of information from their side. And oftentimes you'll get back emails saying, nope, that's not gonna work.
Thank you. I do have a second question, Tim, if that's all right.
Of course. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate your sharing earlier. And it seems like you're always reaching out, not only musically, but also engaging with our current issues, socially, politically, and I think that's really great. I just really want to pick your brain on it. What sort of music or podcasts or books that you have been listening to or that you've been reading that you find really interesting and that we could all have a go at?
I feel like Netflix has been our friend for quite some time now. when it comes to book, I will be the first to admit I am in the middle of the Lord of the Rings series right now. That is something that I've been focusing on quite a bit. I'm also a big film watcher and documentary watcher, first and foremost. The documentary 13 is absolutely amazing on Netflix. Dear White People as well is absolutely fascinating. And just how informative it is for everyone. Give a wrong image of it, but these two documentaries are fascinating to me in just what's going on presently. But if we're talking specifically about music, one of my most favorite documentaries that ever came out was the documentary What Happened to You, Nina Simone. That is something I think everyone should watch from a musical standpoint. The fact that Nina Simone could play Bach fugues better than anyone at the time, and I will go to court saying that for sure, but just to see how her, as a musician, as a singer, as a pianist, first and foremost, which a lot of people would not necessarily realize, but as a pianist, first and foremost, to see what she had to go through her entire life as a musician, the sophistication of the music that she created as well, and of course, you know, in the 60s and 70s, what was going around the civil rights issues. So I don't know, Nina Simone is my musical hero. She's always been at the top of my list no matter what. That would be really important to listen to. When it comes to podcasts, a fun one I've been listening to lately is Jonathan Van Ness's Getting Curious. First and foremost, he's a hairdresser, actually, but he just so happened to come up with this wonderful podcast that interviews all the great political minds in the world in a very bipartisan way. And it just kind of helps you connect to nowadays. And of course, it's a young generation. So with someone like him at the forefront, it's a good way of getting to know what's going on now from great political minds through someone that can kind of translate it in the way. So for me, those are probably the ones that I'm the most fascinated with at the moment.
It's fascinating seeing everyone just writing down all your recommendations. I think Netflix is going to be taking a battering. And Nina Simone singing Lilac Wine, one of my favorite things ever. On
a slightly, just a good book that's come out recently that doesn't have to do with what you're talking about, unfortunately. There is a great Michael Tippett biography that just came out. That's really interesting to read. It's published by Schott. So please give it a listen, or a read, sorry.
Thanks, Ryan. Just so many questions have been coming in. So Madeline, can I ask you to ask your question, please? Maddie is one of our opera directors.
Hi, I was really interested by your dance background, and I wanted to ask, have you conducted much or any ballet, and how do you approach working with dancers? And also, where do you think ballet sits in the kind of new music versus museum music spectrum nowadays? And also just hearing you talk about text, which is wonderful. Do you want to conduct opera? Is that a desire that you have?
Oh, there's 14 questions.
No, but it's good. It's good. Ballet is extremely different from the orchestral world. It's sort of in this world that has advanced about 30 years past where the orchestral world is, in a way, particularly because of choreographers, particularly because of people coming up with new choreography and composers sort of having carte blanche with dancers nowadays, just because the ability of dance has moved in a different direction from simple classical ballet to more contemporary styles. So because of that, music itself is obviously going to adapt to that and is going to need to be a bit more modern, if you understand what I'm saying. But at the same time, if you're listening, or sorry, not listening, but if you're watching a ballet by Balanchine, for example, who worked closely with Igor Stravinsky, he didn't want Stravinsky to change any of his tempos, so he made sure that the dance fit the music. If you go back to Tchaikovsky, if you go back to Prokofiev, it's not necessarily the same thing. If you get the Russian dance from Tchaikovsky and you do the traditional Fokin or before Fokin choreography, it's it's the slowest thing on the face of the planet, and you really lose something there. And then you get it in concert, and it's fun, you know? I just conducted a ballet 4 months ago. Oh my God, we've been in this pandemic for a while now. 4 months ago. And the difficulty in it is every day the dancers are going to feel different. They're going to be faster, they're going to be slower, they're going to be stronger, they're going to be weaker that day. The tempo, unfortunately, will never be correct, and you just have to deal with it. It's just a part of it. But at the same time, A huge part of ballet conducting or working with ballet dancers is reading their bodies. It's reading where their feet are, most importantly. It's reading their body language. It's reading how much they're sweating as well, too. That's a big part of it. When it comes to opera, I have conducted opera. I love conducting opera. It's also a very different beast from orchestral conducting, specifically working with opera directors. From my side, the best pairing is when the opera director is just as obsessed with the music as the conductor is obsessed with the story. So if you have that connection in a way, that's gold. It does not always happen, unfortunately. I hate to say that. But if you get an opera director and a conductor that sort of has their dinner 2 years before the actual production, and the first question is why, then you're in good hands in general. If both parties are asking why, then you're gold after that, for sure.
Jasper, can you ask your question really, really quickly?
Yeah, sorry. So I'm both, I grew up in the brass band tradition and also write for orchestra. I've worked with BBC before now. And often when I write for bands, it can be seen that what I'm doing is not the norm and therefore can be judged for doing that and therefore pieces not getting played, etc. So I was just wondering, from your perspective, should we as composers strive to write and produce art which fulfills what we want to say as a composer, or should we have more of a focus on the audience and thus like making money?
I would say completely forget the second part of what you say and completely focus on the first part of what you said. Can you imagine if Queen pandered to the audience? Can you imagine? Can you imagine if Schoenberg pandered to the audience? Like, can you imagine if David Bowie pandered? It's horrendous. It's horrendous. I mean, the thing that I can say in my own experience, the stronger and more sure in yourself and your output that you are, people will come and you will make money. It's just a part of it. Of course, these things happen at different times. These things will never happen on a timeline that you think it's going to happen. If you feel artistically where your voice is naturally drawn to, I wouldn't even say most interested in, but if your voice is naturally drawn to brass band, string quartet, kazoo consort, whatever it is, that's where you need to go. Because if you're faking, if you're not true to your own artistic voice and you're focused on making money, I get it. I get money as a thing. I'm not going to even pretend that it's not, you know? It's important to be able to pay bills. I'm going to say that. But what a sad world it would be. I mean, simply put, what an absolutely sad world it would be if you only focused on sort of the monetary gain from it. That being said, I think it's a very old school, I won't say old school, it's a very bizarre way of thinking to think that we can only have one bow in our quiver. For me specifically, I'm looking forward to, in the future, getting a degree in art restoration. It's something I've always wanted to do. I hope I can do it. It's something that you need to take a lot of time doing, and I would love to sit with a painting and dust it off and fix it. That's something I've always wanted to do. I would love to get back into dance as well, too. So if you're one of the lucky ones that my voice is exactly in this one area, then great, fantastic, really brilliant. But I think it's a problematic narrative, at least nowadays, to say, or to get influence from other people saying, like, you need to know exactly what you want to do, or like, that's not going to make you money, so you need to do this thing that's going to go there, and then maybe later that other thing is going to happen. It's a lie, and those people don't have your best interest at heart. That's the end of the story for that. So yeah, if your voice is strong in brass band, guess what? There are a lot of great brass bands out there. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, that's my 2 cents on it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, there's this sort of mental hierarchy in a way that people can put themselves into. Like, well, if I'm composing orchestral music, then now this is the pinnacle of it. But then you listen to Beethoven's 13 string quartet, and I'm sorry, I'll take that to a desert island with me before any piece of orchestral music. So yeah, just hone in on what's important to you, and people will come. They always do. You make a market for yourself and it'll be there.
Thank you. Thanks.
Of course.
Thank you, Jasper. Thank you, Ryan. There are two questions that have been put by associates and staff, which I'm just going to ask you quickly.
Sure.
When you get to BBC National Orchestra of Wales, how much will it be you who has the power to do the programming, or will it be Radio 3?
I kind of hate the word power. It's not about
decision.
Yeah, it's always a collaboration. It's always equal collaboration. Currently, we have a wonderful artistic director, or our head of artistic planning with BBC National Orchestra of Wales, Myrig Bowen. I enjoy having coffees with him and chatting with him and talking about everything. And I'm really lucky with him in that he is really interested in what's happening now and composers that are young, and that's important to me. And then, of course, in conversation with BBC Radio 3, they have things that they're interested in as well. So it's always a collaboration, always. Great. It's never not.
And then a question from Alan's iPhone. I should say at this point, this is my husband.
Okay.
He wants to know of the composers you've been discovering lately. Can you drop a couple of names for our young musicians to?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's this incredible Danish composer named I'm going to pronounce it in Danish, Allan Graugaard-Madsen, which no one can spell here. It's spelled Graavgard-Madsen. He's absolutely fantastic. Du Yun, American, I think Taiwanese composer. I could be completely wrong. Fantastic composer of experimental avant-garde theater. Ellen Reed as well. She just won the Pulitzer Prize this last year. She's absolutely phenomenal as well.
That's great.
Yeah, I can send a list because I have a spreadsheet of composers that I'm constantly checking up on and looking at their websites and stuff, for sure.
I'm sure that's going to be such great news to all our young musicians.
Yes.
We're so excited that we get the privilege of having you in Cardiff with our National Orchestra. So I can't wait for this pandemic to be over so that we can meet in the real world. Ryan, at the end of every one of these sessions, I'm doing 5 quick fire questions to all of our artists, just an either or. So are you up for just a quick little fun 5 questions?
Sure.
Okay, trumpet or baton?
Trumpet.
Sondheim or Bernstein?
Oh no. Sondheim.
Rehearsal or performance?
Performance.
Burger or fish and chips?
I'm vegan.
Oh no!
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Burger. Let's go with burger.
I'm sorry. That's appalling research on my behalf.
It's okay. Burger. I found a really great veggie burger the other day. It was fantastic.
Let's forget. There's a great vegan burger place in Cardiff. In Hannah, amazing. Okay, I'll ask you. We'll forget that question. Wine or beer?
I don't drink. I don't. I've never had a drink of alcohol in my life, and I lived in Scotland for 2 years, so that's another thing. It's weird. Don't ask questions. It's
okay. Weird. Right. Sorry. This has been really rubbish on my behalf. Rock or pop?
Pop.
Ryan Bancroft, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this afternoon. It's been a delight to be with you.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. So much. I'm looking forward to actually meeting all of you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.